Hi, guys. It's time to start reading again. We have finished The Magician's Nephew, and we have finished The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but we have not started Prince Caspian. So, to keep things on track, I thought I'd do a little reading. If you want to watch it, great. If you don't want to listen, that's okay too. But I think there are some people who are wanting to find out what happened to Peter, Susan, Lucy, and Edmund. Because guess what? They are going back to Narnia in Prince Caspian. So if you want to listen, sit back, do something else, let me be the noise in the background, or if not, move on to something else. No harm done. So here we go. Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, Chapter 1. The Island. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, and it had been told in another book called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe how they had a remarkable adventure. They had opened the door of a magic wardrobe and found themselves in quite a different world from ours. And in that different world, they had become kings and queens in a country called Narnia. While they were in Narnia, they had seemed to reign for years and years. But when they came back through the door and found themselves in England again, it all seemed to have taken no time at all. At any rate, one noticed that they had never been away, and they had never told anyone except one very wise grown-up. Do you guys remember who that was? Who they told about their adventure? That happened a year ago, and now all 4 of them were sitting on a seat at a railway station with trunks and playboxes piled up around them. They were, in fact, on their way back to school. They had traveled together as far as the station, which was the junction, and here, in a few minutes, one train would arrive and take the girls away to one school, and in a half hour, another train would arrive, and the boys would go off to another school. The first part of the journey, when they were all together, always seemed to be part of the holidays. But now, when they would be saying goodbye and going in different ways very soon, everyone felt that the holidays were really over, and everyone felt that their term time feelings began again, and they were all rather gloomy, and no one could think of anything to say. Lucy was going to boarding school for the first time. So they're getting ready to go back to school. I guess we're all a little jealous right now because we wish we could go back to school. But right now, they're not quite feeling that. It was an empty, sleepy country station, and there was hardly anyone on the platform except themselves. Suddenly, Lucy gave a sharp little cry, like someone who had been stung by a wasp. "What's up, Lou?" said Edmund, and then suddenly broke off and made a noise like, "Ow! What on earth?" began Peter, and then he too suddenly changed what he had been going to say. Instead, he said, "Susan, let go. What are you doing? What are you dragging me into?" "I'm not touching you," said Susan. "Someone is playing." "Ow! Ah! Stop it!" Everyone noticed that the other faces had gone very white. "I felt just the same," said Edmund in a breathless voice, "as if I were being dragged along. A most frightful— Ow! It's beginning again." "Me too," said Lucy. "I can't bear it." "Look sharp," shouted Edmund. "All catch hands and keep together. This is magic. I can tell by the feeling. Quick!" "Yes," said Susan. "Hold hands. Oh, I do wish it was— Ow!" Next moment, the luggage, the seat, the platform, and the station had completely vanished. The 4 children, holding hands and panting, found themselves standing in a woody place. Suddenly, a woody place that branches were sticking into them, and there was hardly room to move. They all rubbed their eyes to took a deep breath. "Peter," exclaimed Lucy, "do you think we possibly have gotten back into Narnia?" "It might be anywhere," said Peter. "I can't see a yard in all of these trees. Let's try to get into the open, if there is any open." With some difficulty, and with some stings from the nettles and pricks from the thorns, they struggled out of the thicket. Then they had another surprise. Everything became brighter, and after a few steps, they found themselves at the edge of the wood, looking down on a sandy beach. A few yards away, a very calm sea was falling on the sand, which with such tiny ripples that it made hardly any sound. There was no land in sight, no clouds in the sky. The sun was about at where it should be for 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sea was a dazzling blue. They stood sniffing by the sea smell. By Jove, said Peter, this is good enough. 5 minutes later, everyone was barefooted and wading in the cool, clear water. This is better than being in a stuffy train on the way back to Latin and French and algebra, said Edmund. And then for quite a long time there was no more talking, only splashing and looking for shrimps and crabs. All the same, said Susan presently, I suppose we'll have to make some plans. We shall want to have something to eat before long. We've got the sandwiches Mother gave us for the journey, said Edmund. Oh, at least I've got mine. Not me, said Lucy. Mine was in my little bag. So were mine, said Susan. Mine are in my coat pocket. There on the beach, said Peter. That'll be 2 lunches among 4. This isn't going to be much fun. At present, said Lucy, I want something to drink so that more than something to eat. Everyone now felt thirsty, as one usually is after wading in salt water and being under the hot sun. It's like being shipwrecked, remarked Edmund. In the books, they always find springs of clear, fresh water on an island. We'd better go back and look for them. Does that mean we'll have to go back into all of that wood? Said Susan. Not a bit of it, said Peter. If there are streams, they are bound to come to the sea. And if we walk along the beach, we are bound to come to them. They all now waded back and went first across the smooth and wet and then up to some dry and crumbly sand that sticks to one's toes, and began putting on their shoes and socks. Edmund and Lucy wanted to leave them behind and do their exploring with bare feet, but Susan said that this would be a mad thing to do. We might never find them again, she pointed out. And we shall want them when we are still here and when night comes and it begins to become cold. When they were all dressed again, they set out along the shore with the sea on their left hand and the wood on their right. Except for an occasional seagull, it was a very quiet place. The wood was so thick and tangled that they could hardly see into it at all, and nothing in it moved. Not even a bird, not even an insect. Shells and seaweed and anemones, our tiny crabs or rock pools are all very well, but you soon get tired of them when you are thirsty. The children's feet, after the change from the cool water, felt hot and heavy. Susan and Lucy had raincoats to carry. Edmund had put down his coat at the station seat just before the magic had overtaken them, and he and Peter took in turns to carry Peter's great coat. Presently, the shore began to curve around to the right. About a quarter of an hour later, after they had crossed a rocky bridge which ran out into a point, it made quite a sharp turn. Their backs were now to the part of the sea which had met them when they first came out of the wood, and now, looking ahead, they could see across the water another shore, thickly wooded, like the one they were exploring. I wonder, is that an island, or will we be joining it presently? Said Lucy. Don't know, said Peter, and they all plodded on in silence. The shore that they were walking on drew nearer and nearer to the opposite shore, and as they came around each prominently, the children expected to find the place where the two had joined. But in this, they were disappointed. When they came to some rocks to which they had to climb, and from the top they could see way ahead, and Oh, bother, said Edmund. It's no good. We shan't be able to get to those other woods at all. We are on an island. It was true. At this point, the channel between them and the opposite coast was only about 30 or 40 yards wide, but they could now see that at its narrowest place. After that, they were on the coast bent around to the right, and again they could see an open sea between it and the mainland. It was obvious that they had already come much more than halfway around the island. Look, said Susan suddenly. Look at that. What's that? She pointed at a long, silvery, snake-like thing that lay across the beach. A stream! A stream! Shouted the others, and tired as they were, they lost no time in clattering down the rocks and racing to the fresh water. They knew that the stream would be better to drink farther up, away from the beach, so they went at once to the spot where it came out of the wood. The trees were as thick as ever, but the stream had made it a deep course between the high mossy banks, so that by stooping down you could follow it up into a tunnel of leaves. They dropped down to their knees by the first brown dimply pool and drank and dipped their faces in the water, and then they dipped their arms up to the elbow. Now, said Edmund, what about those sandwiches? Hadn't we better save them? Said Susan. We may need them far worse later on. I do wish, said Lucy, now that we're not as thirsty, we could go on feeling not hungry as we did when we were, thirsty. But what about those sandwiches? Repeated Edmund. There's no good saving them till they go bad. You've got to remember it's a good deal hotter here than in England, and we've been carrying those in our pockets for hours. So they got out the 2 packets and divided them into 4 portions, and nobody had quite enough. But it was a great deal better than nothing. Then they talked about their plans for their next meal. Lucy wanted to go back to the sea and catch shrimps, until someone pointed out that they had no nets. Edmund said that they must gather gulls' eggs from the rocks, but when they came to think that they couldn't remember having seen any gulls' eggs, that it wouldn't be able to cook them even if they found them. Peter thought to himself that unless they had some stroke of luck, that they may be soon to be glad to eat the eggs raw, but he didn't see any point in saying that out loud. Soon it was Susan said it was a pity they had eaten all the sandwiches so soon. Not very good advice. 1 or 2 tempers very nearly got lost at this stage. Finally, Edmund said, Look here. There's only one thing to be done. We must explore the wood. Hermits and knight-errants and people like that always manage to live somehow when they're in the forest. They find roots and berries and things. What sort of roots? Asked Susan. I always thought it meant roots of trees, said Lucy. Come on, said Peter. Ed is right. We must try to do something, and it'll be better than going into the glare of the sun again. So they all got up and began to follow the stream. It was very hard work. They had to stoop under branches and climb over branches, and then they blundered through a mass of stuff like rhododendrons and tore their clothes and got their feet wet in the next stream. And still there was no noise at all except the noise of the stream and the noises they were making themselves. They were beginning to get very tired of it when all of a sudden they noticed a delicious smell. And then a flash of bright color above them at the top of the right bank. I say, exclaimed Lucy, I do believe that's apple trees. And it was. They panted up the steep bank, forced their way through some brambles, and found themselves standing on an old tree that was heavy with large yellowish golden apples, as firm and juicy as you could see. And this is not the only tree, said Edmund, with his mouth full of apple. Look there and there. Why, there's dozens of them, said Susan, throwing a core of her first apple and picking up a second. This must have been an orchard long, long ago, before the place went wild and grew up. And here they are, going into this area. I wonder if it's quite safe. We'll find out. Then, this once was an inhabited land. And what's that? Said Lucy, pointing ahead. By Jove, it's a wall, said Peter, an old stone wall. Pressing their way between the laden branches, they reached the wall. It was very old and broken down in places with moss and wallflowers growing on it, but it was higher than all of the tallest trees. And when they came quite close to it, they found a great arch, which must have once been a gate in it, but almost was filled up with all of the apple trees. They had to break some of the branches to get past, and when they had done so, they all blinked because the daylight became suddenly much brighter. They found themselves in a wide open place with walls around it. Here and there were no trees, only level grass and daisies, and ivy and gray walls. It was a bright, secret, quiet place, and rather sad. And all four stepped out into the middle of it, glad to be able to strengthen their backs and move their limbs freely. Wait, said Lucy. This is not a garden. What is it? Where are they? And what have they found their way into? We'll find out later, and I hope you enjoyed Chapter 1 of Prince Caspian. See you guys soon.